Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing the Amusement Preservation Museum. Our presenter today is Troy Parsh. Before we get started, I just have a couple quick announcements to make, just to make the webinar experience better for everyone. First off, if you have any weird technical things that happen during the presentation day, such as slides don't seem to be moving, sound is weird, just close down the webinar, re-click the link that was sent to you, and that should solve 99% of the problems you're experiencing. Also, we'll be taking questions periodically through this webinar and also at the end. So if you have any questions, just please type them into the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll get those answered for you once we take our question breaks. Finally, this webinar will be recorded. We'll be sending out a copy of it to everyone tomorrow afternoon. Typically, right around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock is usually when it goes out. So look for that. You can also find our recordings of our webinars on our YouTube account. Just search Heritage Ohio, and you'll find 15 years of videos to review. So I want to introduce our speaker today, Troy Parsh. He's the amusement park historian and co-operator of the Amusement Preservation Museum here in Ohio. He's been digging up amusement park history for over a decade. For the last 8 years with his father, he's been rescuing park artifacts, and they've restored their first restoration was a pair of Raging Wolf Bob's cars from Geauga Lake. And that spiraled into the creation of the Amusement Park Museum. He's accumulated several stories from visitors, operators, and owners of parks over the years, and he's always excited to share these stories and take a trip back through time with everyone. So without further ado, I'll just turn things over to Troy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Troy. I started the Amusement Preservation Museum roughly around 2017 is when it officially started forming. That's like about when we got the Wolf Bob cars. And I see a lot of familiar faces. Well, shouldn't say faces, names in the chat over here. And I see James is the first one to ask a question, and I will answer that later. Um, so first off, it is a private collection. It is not open to the public yet. We do events throughout the year. The next one's going to be Sights and Sounds of Euclid Beach on September 28th. Highly recommend everyone getting out there if you can. There'll be more information about that at the end. And then we have an annual open house every June. So next year it'll be June 7th, 6th and 7th next year. But there'll be more information about that going up on the website sometime closer to the end of the year. Now, can everybody see the presentation all right? Just if you can, give me a thumbs up or something in the chat, please. Just want to
Looks
make
good
sure
on
everyone
our
can
end.
see. All good on your end? Perfect. All right, so now one of the big questions are, what parks do we have in the collection? We have a ton of different parks in the collection. Last I counted, we have somewhere around 40 different parks. Perfect. I see the comments. Yep, we're all good to go then. But our biggest ones are Cedar Point, Geauga Lake, Euclid Beach, and there's a few other ones that are pretty predominant in the collection, like Chippewa Lake. That one actually, funnily enough, we didn't have much from that park until about a year and a half ago, and now that is our single largest collection, like sub collection. And yes, there is some stuff from Americana. We have a sign from Screeching Eagle, the big one that said "Fly the Screeching Eagle" for those who got to ride that, and then parts of the cars, and then a bunch of other odds and ends from there as well. Another frequently asked question we do get is how much do we have from Kings Island? Not much at all. I have one little thing from their one of their old dark rides, and that's about it. So that one's not too predominant, but a lot of our collections from Northern Ohio with just a few odds and ends from elsewhere. Oh, thought I hit advance to that. So there's again a good list of a bunch of the parks we have stuff from. I thought this was a cool graphic. I spent about an hour on it yesterday, so I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I do. But yeah, in this picture, can you guys see my mouse so I can point at stuff? I don't know if that's
I'm not seeing it, but you can
here.
try.
I can do this. Can you guys see that one? The circle?
Yep, that's good.
Perfect. Okay, so that car there, that is from the Crystal Beach Giant Coaster up in Ontario. That is one of my personal favorite ride cars in the collection. If you notice these wheels down on the sides here, that is what guides it. So it sits in a trough, kind of like a log flume, and it would meander down through the track and had actually pretty big drops for having no way to actually contain the coaster in the track. So there's nothing that held you down to the track at all on that one. Um, then over here on the right, you have the Lenape coaster. Um, Now we will get a little more into the difference between those two here in a minute. I've seen a lot of messages. Yeah, that's a good point. Anyone that ever wants to stop by, do not hesitate to reach out, send me a message on Facebook or an email, amusementpreservation@gmail.com. And you're more than welcome to stop by, view the collection, help us out because we're always looking for help. My dad does a lot of the restoration work because I'm usually gone during the day at work. So any help is always appreciated. Um, uh, it's not letting me advance it. There we go. So now on to our first project, which of course was the Raging Wolf Bobs, as previously mentioned. Now, this picture here is one of our first events we ever did. That was actually at Sights and Sounds Euclid Beach, I believe in 2019, I believe was that year, the year that that photo was taken. But you can see that was the second time ever we had the Wolf Bob cars out, and the first time anyone saw the Lenape car, which you can kind of see out in the background, or at the other end of the trailer. Now, when we got the Wolf Bob cars, they looked a little different than they do now. So here you can actually see what we walked upon on the top. So again, these things were just kind of sitting down in the mud and they're rotting away. All of the stuff that was sitting on these frames, so all of this stuff on top, that was all piled in the guy's front yard and pretty much looked abandoned. Now, the cool thing with the Raging Wolf Bobs, and the only reason we were able to really get it restored, is that they're built by Philadelphia Toboggan Company. The cars were built by Philadelphia Toboggan Company out there in Pennsylvania. And we actually got to go out to their facility, and he essentially taught us how to rebuild the cars. Because again, I'm looking at these, it's a giant puzzle. I mean, each piece goes together a certain way, and we had no idea how the thing went back together. So we actually got to go out there, and he gave us a rundown on how to rebuild their cars. And after a lot of work, again, here's more of the restoration photos. All the side panels that my dad had cut, because my dad pretty much did all of the woodwork on these. And then I did the repainting of the base. Um, yeah, there's a lot that went into these things. Again, we restored both of the lead cars to the red train. Now, one big question we always had with it is what the heck did the front look like when it was originally built? Now, Philadelphia Toboggan Company sent it out with just these steel fronts here, but it actually had a. Can I? Well, give me this thing back. Can you guys still see the screen? Because I realize.
Nope, it just went away. We're back to you and I as
Ah,
giant heads.
so I clearly hit the wrong thing. Okay, noted. Don't hit that button. um, Perfect. So let's go back. Let's try to do this. So this front on the right here, that's what was originally on it. That's just a piece of bent in front of this car looked like a really. And then another cool thing is we returned the solid wood running boards down the side because once they start wearing away, the parts would always paint those over. And a cool fun fact about this coaster is actually designed by Din Corporation, which was down in southern Ohio. And they kind of morphed over the years. They were Din Corporation, they became Custom Coasters International. And now some of the guys that used to work for that company are now running another company down there called Gravity Group. And they actually built the closest one to Northern Ohio of theirs is Ravine Flyer 2 up at Waldameer. So still cool. Nearly 150 years later, we still have roller coasters being designed here in Ohio. As we'll get to later on, Ohio was actually the birthplace of the man that invented the modern roller coaster. So that'll be something kind of cool for later. Uh, now we should be able to do that. Now here's the reason that the cars were separate from the coaster in the auction. They were used for their Halloween event when Six Flags owned Geauga Lake. And when they had the auctions, the coaster was auctioned separately from all the Halloween stuff. So they had a normal auction and then they had a Halloween auction, and these were sold in the Halloween auction. And that's how these got separated from the rest of them. The rest of them ended up in the collection of the Euclid Beach boys, and they actually have another auction coming up here October 4th, which will still have some ride cars up for auction, some ride signs. But I actually got a third one of these cars from the previous 2 auctions ago. And here is one of said cars. This is the third car to that train, so we now have half of the train in one place. Now, second restoration was a coaster from 1926, Lenape Park. It was a small trolley park out in Pennsylvania, Westchester, Pennsylvania. And the park has some interesting stories behind it. So, trolley parks would always be placed at the end of a trolley line, hence the name Trolley Park. And it would be used on the weekends, so the trolleys would still have service 7 days a week. So they'd be used for it all 7 days. Now, Lenape Park was kind of a little off the beaten path. Not horribly out of the way, but just enough they didn't have electric lines running out there. So what they ended up doing is they actually tied the park's electricity into the lines that ran their uh, trolley line. So every time the trolley would come up the hill, because again, going uphill, it uses a lot more electricity, and all the lights in the park would dim so everyone knew about 5 minutes in advance that the trolley was about to be there. So that's one of my favorite little tidbits about that place. But it was a fairly small park. They pretty much just had the wooden coaster and a carousel. Now, what you can actually see here on the left is a full train of their coasters, just a 3-car train. But the thing that's crazy is you can look at the right side. There was no lap bar. That bar you can see running around the top, that was all that held you in. There was no seatbelt, no lap bar. That was your full restraint. And these cars, I believe these are the exact same car, just about 70-ish years apart. Because it did have 2 trains. But now the car that we restored was in really rough shape. As you can see on the right, there's a lot of rotted wood, or you can see on the left rather, that there's a lot rotted out on the front of it. So that whole front end was redone. Again, most of this work was done by my dad. I can't claim to have done much of anything on it. And I mean, he does an incredible job on this stuff. And it looks like it did. It looks like the cars that Philadelphia Toboggan Company has over there in Pennsylvania still, because they've restored a few of their 100-year-old cars to have on display to show where they were and where they are now. And I know they are impressed with what we have done with them. Now, Sauzer's Kittyland. So this was a park out in Indiana, and we actually have 2 items from there. It was very similar to like Memphis Kitty Park when it started out. The Kittyland was actually very widely spread because of Alan Herschel, the manufacturer of all the rides on the screen, actually, and many of the ones that are at Cedar Point's Kitty Kingdom. And if you see anything that's really old and still running in a kiddie ride, there's a good chance at least one of those rides out of like 3 to 5 are one of Alan Herschel's, because they just run forever. They're very hard rides to kill. But 2 of the rides we actually got from there are the Swingin' Jims. Now, this is a ride that we have the entire ride of. Now, for those who remember the Swingin' Jims, these used to be common back in like the late 50s to early 70s is when they had their heyday. And they kind of straggled through. Ohio actually had one running on a carnival circuit until 2018, and that was out of Columbus. But theirs has since been decommissioned. I'm not sure what the status of it is. I know he had it up for sale, but I don't believe it's in the public eye anymore. But when I found these, I found them online and reached out to the lady that was selling them. Her name was Kim. And I just reached out, hey, what is your plans with these? And she goes, well, we're just trying to get rid of them. She just didn't want to see them go to the scrapyard. Well, she had seen a lot of scrappers trying to get them. She ended up saying, if you come pay scrap value for them, you can have them. So my dad and I planned to go out there, and I dragged 2 friends along. And we started taking him down. And on the right side here is what it looked like after day one. Now, that may be the craziest experience of my life because those swing arms that you can see on the left here, these big diamonds, those weigh about 150 pounds a piece just for that part. That's not including the rest of this arm down here. So what happened is we got these cages taken off and then flipped the swing arms upside down. And then we had to have two guys under it to catch it. Essentially, we had one guy in a rope to make sure it didn't fall, and then the third guy had to knock it loose. So after doing 4 of those, that was brutal. And then we ended up settling on what you can see on the right side here after day one. Now, we were hoping to have the whole thing torn apart in day one, but unfortunately, that's not what happened. So day 2, oh, there's one other thing for the park. We do have a Ferris wheel car from the park as well. That'll tie back into the story here in a minute. Day 2, we ended up getting the towers down, and you can see my dad and John right here. That's my dad in the foreground, and then behind him was John, the actual owner of them, the guy that originally moved him to his backyard from the park. Now, we get all the towers down, and something that's a little hard to see, but you can kind of make it out here, is that frame is about 6 inches thick, and it's completely buried in the mud, and weighs probably about 1.5 tons, 2 tons, and we had no machinery to move this. So we're trying to get it up out of the mud, and just struggling every step of the way. And Kim looks at us and goes, "Why don't you take the car ramps that we had laying next to it that belonged to John's son?" She said, "Why don't you put them under it like skis and tow the thing out with the truck?" And we go, "That's ridiculous. That'll never work." Well, it worked very well. So if you ever need to move anything heavy, car ramps make really good skis. And then we ended up getting that all loaded up. And after about 3.5 years of restoration, they're fully functional once again as the only operating swinging gyms on this side of the Mississippi. The only other one is up in Wisconsin somewhere. It's in the middle of absolutely nowhere. But those ones were built in-house. These ones are official Indiana-built swinging gyms that would have potentially been on the carnival circuit because these were technically a portable model. Now, to go back to that Ferris wheel car. So while we were restoring the swinging gyms, it kept going back and forth out because the swinging gyms were very labor intensive to get running again. We had a lot of small projects in there, and one of them was this Ferris wheel car. Now, this Ferris wheel car, what's really cool is it turns out when John was a teenager, he actually ran that Ferris wheel ride. So we actually stopped by their house when we picked that Ferris wheel car because we picked that up about a year later. And that was the last time we got to see John, but he saw the Ferris wheel car, his face lit up because he had, again, operated that ride for a year or two when he was a kid or a teenager. And shortly after that visit, John passed away. Then about a year following, Kim also passed away. So the swinging gyms are very much restored in their honor. In fact, I frequently refer to them as John and Kim swinging gyms. And then once I get time, I do want to make official sign or plaque that says that on the front. Now, current projects. Here you can actually see 3 of the coaster cars in this picture are from Chippewa Lake, which of course was in, well, Medina County, up by us, about 40 minutes from us. But you can see we have one of all 3 of their coaster cars that we're operating at the end. So on top is from the Little Dipper, which is actually very similar to the one that's still at Memphis Kiddie Park to this day. You have the Wild Mouse car, which was, as everyone says, a very crazy ride. Because the front end overhung the turns and it looked like you're going to fly right off. And then on top here is the Chippewa Lake coaster. Now that coaster was, for those who think of an abandoned amusement park, that is often the coaster that you see pictured. And the whole structure for that was actually just torn down in around 2010. Now underneath, this one's a little bit newer. This is actually a log flume boat from the Columbus Zoo, and this boat was put onto their log ride in 2019. Now, their log flume closed after the 2019 season, so this boat was only used 1 year. But what is kind of cool with that, with the zoo, is that whole amusement park area was once owned by the same company that owned Geauga Lake and Darien Lake up in New York. So those were the three sister parks of the Funtime Corporation back in the day. Um, and then of course, then eventually they got bought up by Premier, and then Premier bought Six Flags, which now merged with Cedar Fair, and now it's Cedar Fair Entertainment Corporation. But it's kind of funny because the parks that started it all are no longer with the company. Well, technically one's back with the company. Darien Lake is back with the company. But it's funny how that part came full circle and the other two really aren't part of it anymore. It's back. There we go. Now, so the current project with these are is I'm working on building carts for everything, to help with storage. And actually, here you can see the process of getting the Chippewa coaster car on top. That was interesting to say the least. People don't realize how much these things weigh, and it's a lot. And then on the right side, you can see what is Raging Wolf Lab's card number 4, which we are actually currently restoring for the Aurora Historical Society, or sorry, City of Aurora. They are currently working on revitalizing the old SeaWorld property over there in, well, over in Aurora. And what they have plans really cool. And I'm pretty excited to see what they do. It should be opening next spring if they hit all their deadlines. Another current project is I've been making 3D printed models. Actually, I have one of them right here. These things are a lot of fun, but that has also been a side project that I've been doing to essentially fund the whole project. Um, Now, future projects include the two most immediate ones are probably going to be a cuddle up car from Sandy Beach, which hopefully we will have time to cover a little more later on in this, and a tilt-a-whirl from Erie View Park up in Geneva on the Lake. Now, Erie View Park was kind of weird because it kind of morphed into Geneva on the Lake itself. If you go up there to this day, you can still play the old Fascination game. There's still the arcades there. There's still putt-putt. I don't know if that all functioned together at one point. I need to still do a little digging on that. But they all essentially function as an amusement park just right downtown Geneva on the Lake. It's still a really cool place to visit if you've not been there. Now, Chippewa Lake. So again, going back to the ride cars that we have from there, we have one of each of the coaster cars, excuse me, and a bunch of other odds and ends. But this is a segue into what does the park look like now? So now we got a tour of the property back in 2021, and it's really cool because I mean they have the paths all like mowed back out so you can walk through. It's not open to the public yet. The park system owns it now, and they plan on having it open at some point when they have the funding. I know it kind of keeps getting pushed back a little further every year, so I don't have an exact opening day when you can visit. But I know their plan is to keep the Ferris wheel somewhere, which will be cool. You slide or you walk down the midway a little bit from the Ferris wheel, and the old flying cages structures there, which was their version of the swinging gyms, which theirs is much bigger because on the left side you can see what it used to look like. But the thing is this right here is roughly about where ours tops out at. But some of the park mount models and even carnival models, but they're built a little different, have a bar that goes all the way over the top for a little extra stability, also so they can hang signs up there. And then even I believe it was Knoebels when they had these, they actually had a full canopy that would drape over the whole top of them to keep rain off them. That because once it rains, you can't run the swinging gyms. But if you can cover it, then you can keep them running. But Knoebels was one of the few that I know that actually tarp theirs. And Knoebels is still operating. They are out in Elysburg, PA. Again, an awesome traditional amusement park if you ever get a chance. It's from people that have been to Euclid Beach, they say it's the closest feeling to Euclid Beach there still is. And Euclid Beach was up here in Cleveland. Now, something kind of cool about it though is this ride's been abandoned for something like 50 years. And these swing arms here, so those are the counterweights. That takes the place of the diamonds that are on ours. You can still spin them by hand, so it was caught me off guard that they still function. So they're built very well. Moving down the midway a little bit further was the kiddie coaster. There's a lot of trees growing up through it. And again, this is virtually the same layout as the one at Memphis Kiddie Park, although not in great shape. There's even a part towards the back turnaround that had collapsed. A tree had fallen out and tipped the coaster down. So unfortunately, that coaster's in very much disrepair. Now, one of the most popular things at the park, and this goes for almost any park back in the day, which was the ballroom. Now, back in '02 or early 2000s, um, this ballroom was burned down by what was said to be the daughter of the sheriff. So, fortunately, no repercussions were made for the fact that a bunch of teenagers went and burned down this massive, beautiful structure. But unfortunately, even if it didn't burn down, it probably eventually would collapse on its own, regardless. Now, as many of the parks of the time, many big bands had gone through there of the era. And a lot of the ballrooms that are still in existence in Ohio, well, of the amusement park ones, which I believe's only Cedar Point's and Geauga Lakes, if I'm not mistaken, are the last two standing. Cedar Point's was built in the early 1900s, then the Geauga Lake was built later on after their original one burned down. Um, but this was actually one of very few of the actual old ones that were still standing. Unfortunately, again, is no longer there. Um, One really cool thing that I did notice is there's one spot down through the forest. There are all these flowers planted very strategically. I will show the shape on the left side here. So, oh, oh, let's go back. I have annotate these. Well, anyway, it's almost like a double L shape that leads up to what would have been the entrance to the ballroom, which is kind of cool because someone planted those flowers at least 50 years ago, and they're still standing there to this day. And still surviving exactly where they're planted to this day, showing where the midway used to be. So that was something I found really cool about the property. Now, one of our most recent acquisitions, and we're going to shift gears away from Chippewa Lake here. This is actually a Laugh in the Dark car from Euclid Beach, which was their dark ride, which is really cool. So if you actually notice with this ride car, the wood here on the front is thicker than the wood on the back. So the reason for that is that it had a ride there originally called the Witching Waves. Now the way the Witching Waves worked is it had a big mechanical system under the floor, and the floor would actually bow. It was able to bow like it was making waves. And then the ride cars, this guy would sit down in the waves and you could actually follow them almost like a surfer. Now the problem was is the ride was very hard for the guests to actually maneuver. So what Euclid Beach ended up doing is they added essentially this part onto it. That case there was to hide the motor. Then they ended up making the floor itself stronger to withstand the motor. And they put it on a track. Then that's how they made their dark ride. Now Euclid Beach was very innovative. A lot of their rides were actually, or I should say a lot of their rides. A lot of things in the park were built in-house, including the rocket ship ride. The rocket ship structure itself was built by Traver Industries. It was originally their, I can't remember the type of ride it is off the top of my head. It was airplane. I think it may have just been called an airplane ride. It was this big ride. You flew around in circles in what looked roughly like a biplane. But when the space age started, a lot of parks wanted the rocket ships. So a lot of them bought upgrade kits for their rides. If that includes Geauga Lake, they bought theirs from Traver. Euclid Beach, however, they built theirs in-house from scratch. And that carried through a lot of the park. Unfortunately, I don't think I have any more Euclid Beach pictures on this one to accompany. I do not. So, that being said, they also built ticket eaters that would have it's going crazy. There we go. Um, They built ticket eaters that you would drop your tickets in, then it would roll down and then chew the tickets up similar to just a paper shredder that you'd have at home. The reason they did that is because they were finding out that kids were going down the hill to where they burned all of the tickets and were pulling the unburnt ones out from the middle of the pile the next morning and then would reuse the tickets. So they made the ticket eaters all in house. And they had quite a few other things throughout the park that were all made in house. But it was a truly impressive operation. Again, had their entire engineering firm in house. And another cool thing that actually kind of changed the world a little bit was they found out how to pour vertical concrete. And those original cottages that they built are actually still standing to this day. I have no idea how much longer they have, but they are still standing there. Um, so before I move on, does anybody have any questions so far?
Troy, there was a question a little bit ago about Lamarcus A. Thompson was born in Ohio. Yes or no?
The market. Oh, yes, yeah, he was. That'll actually be on the next segment. So there is a little bit about him on the next one. So we will answer quite a few questions about Lamarcus Thompson. I believe it was Jersey, Ohio. I want to say he was born in.
And I'm not
Um,
seeing any others, so you can keep on going.
well, so I will move on to the next one. Um, I believe it's this one. That yes, this is the one that touches on Lamarcus. So I will make sure to get to this one first. Um, sorry, Andy. What's the question about Little America? I will give him this. I'll start, and when his question pops up, I'll pause and answer. So, okay, so what we're going to get into now is the roller coasters and essentially their beginning, which, again, going back to Lamarcus Thompson, Ohio is the birthplace of the roller coaster, kind of indirectly. Because the first roller coaster was not in Ohio, but the guy that designed it was. So the beginning, they actually started with a place out in Pennsylvania called the Mauchunk and Summit Railroad. Now, what's actually really cool is I got to visit here. Oh, hold on, let's backpedal 1 second. The flying cages I mentioned. No, the flying cages that are over there are up in Paul Bunyan Land. That might, did I say Wisconsin? Minnesota. Minnesota is what I meant to say. Paul Bunyan Land up in Minnesota has the other swinging gyms. I apologize. Um, okay, back to the Mauchunk Railroad. Uh, so what's really cool is it was the second gravity railroad ever built. It was one of the first railroads in general in America, and it opened in 1827. Now, the point of it was it brought coal down the hill, and how it worked at the start anyway is they had mules that would pull the train cars up the hill. They'd load everything at the top, and then they had a brakeman that would bring it back down. Now, what was kind of funny with it is how do you get the mules back down? So they actually had mule cars that they put the mules in, and they'd ride the train back down too. Well, in the process of all that, the workers there went, that looks like a great way to get down the hill. So naturally, they would also go down the hills. And as time went on, they actually ended up putting passenger cars on it. And when the coal operation stopped, they turned it into an attraction. Now, it again, oh, here you go. 1872 is when it stopped freight operations, and then it operated until 1932. Now, Lamarcus Thompson actually ended up seeing that, and here you can see the passenger cars that they would use. Now, Lamarcus Thompson actually saw this, and this is the inspiration for the first purpose-built gravity railroad. Now, what's really cool is going back to the Pennsylvania part, Pennsylvania trip earlier this year. The catch cars to hook onto the railroad cars would actually go underground, and then the cars would roll over top. They'd stop it. The catch car would come up behind it, and tow it up the hill. But the cool thing is the pit for the cars to set down and still exists there. Unfortunately, it's very hard to see when you're there. It's all overgrown with shrubbery. So the pictures I had, they weren't exciting. You can kind of make out the cement blocks, but in the pictures, it was very hard to make out. Um, so if you're ever in the area and want to make a pit stop, it's very out of the way from anywhere. But it's a cool place to stop and kind of check it out. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the hiking trail. They do have a hiking trail up that mountain, and they have a mock-up of the train car that would have gone down it. One of these passenger cars, actually. They have a mock-up of one of these. It's a little bit smaller. It's not quite the scale. And then they have different points. You can see where the bridge used to be that would cross the valley. It's over the hill. If you go up over that mountain there was about 9 miles of railroad over there. And at one point, it had to cross a valley. Now, again, that being said, it was very inconveniently located, ceased operations in the 1930s. And Lamarcus Thompson decided, hey, what if I make one of these purpose built? So that's when he designed the Switchback Railway, which was 100%, at the beginning anyway, was completely human operated. The way it would work is you'd load on one side. So you walk up a platform, load over here. Your train would go this way. And the one that actually got built, so this was just the patent for it. This isn't exactly how they functioned. The train would go that way, and then it would stop right about here on the track. It would stop right about there. And it actually had an anti-rollback device that would stop the train. Everyone would hop off, and they'd hop on the train going back the other way. Now, the original cars on it were essentially park benches with wheels screwed to them. Pretty much looked like, which you'll see should be the next one. Yeah, you can kind of make out not exactly the best picture, but this is the picture of the first, or drawing rendition, I should say, of the very first roller coaster, purpose-built roller coaster. Now again, these were very rudimentary machines. You go down to one side, it would stop, everyone would hop off, hop on the one that's ready to go back the other way. They'd ride it down, and the operators would push the other car back to the top of the other hill and wait for the next one to come, which would then stop on the up side. Then those people hop off, and it was just a constant running chain. Now, Lamarcus Thompson, he was born in Jersey, Ohio in 1848, and then passed away in 1919, and then was a mentor to the legendary John Miller. John Miller was another guy, we're probably not going to get to touch on him today, but was another fantastic roller coaster engineer that revolutionized the industry. Some fun facts about his first machine. It only went 6 miles per hour. It had sideways seating, which was very uncomfortable from what everyone presumably said. Again, that was kind of loosely kind of passed down through the years, but the only assumption is uncomfortable and a bit awkward. And it stood 50 feet tall. And then eventually for the second season, they turned the seats 90 degrees, so you're actually facing forward when he rode it. Now, his Ohio installations were the Scenic Railway in Rocky River. That park's a really cool park. Again, I don't know if we'll have time to touch on it. I do want to start releasing videos of a lot of these old parks at the time and getting them on our Facebook and website, but that is going to take a lot of time. So, on spot where can it? Truth be told, I'm not. Is that where it stood? I'm honestly not sure off the top of my head exactly where it stood or where the Switchback Railway stood. I know somewhere in the Coney Island district. For those unaware, Coney Island in New York is built up of different vendors. So each plot of land was operated and built by someone else completely differently. And very frequently, the owners changed. So a lot of things changed very rapidly over there because the new operated by the land, level all the old stuff, and build theirs from scratch. Back to Ohio installations, you also had the Latamas Scenic Railway, which was at Lake Erie Park and Casino in Toledo. which is a massive pier that they used to have out in Toledo. A very impressive structure. I wish I had somewhere I have a photo of the entire pier in its entirety, and the thing's massive. Unfortunately, I did not have that one digitized yet, so I'm not able to share that yet. Again, once I get to making all the online little videos, hopefully I can get that scanned in there. And then the last two were actually at Euclid Beach. So you had the Scenic Railway and the Switchback Railway. Switchback, of course, came first. That was the rudimentary first style. And then the Scenic Railway, which you can see pictured here on the right, was his second design that was a bigger thrill coaster. That one was actually powered by a motor, so you didn't need to push the cars to the top. And with Euclid Beach's expanding popularity, they essentially needed to move away from the hand-powered coaster. Now, a few other installations of similar rides to Lamarcus Thompson are around. Like Cedar Point had a switchback railway. Unfortunately, it is not 100% known if he indeed built it or if it was just contracted and built off of his designs. So unfortunately, there are a few others that could be L.A. Thompson's designs, but it is unfortunately not confirmed. Now, I'm going to give everyone a second to try and answer this question because someone here might know. Does anybody know where the very first roller coaster in Ohio was? Just type the city or type the park because it's a park that we already touched on today. So it's going to be kind of shocking, actually, because everyone thinks Euclid Beach, Cedar Point, they had the switchback railways. So everyone thinks those would have been the first ones to have it. But indeed, it was actually Chippewa Lake. So their coaster actually opened in 1885, which is actually a better part of a decade before the other ones opened. The other ones were early 90s. And unfortunately, there's no photos of it. I've dug through many archives and I've only found 4 references to the coaster ever in existence, and they're all in Medina newspapers. And all of them, the entire contents of them is the first one saying they're getting a gravity-powered gravity track, is one of them is. Another one actually called it a roller coaster, which was later, I believe, later in the summer. And then there's a third one of a guy complaining about the noise that lived near the park, saying it was too loud and just someone complaining in the newspaper. And then the fourth one, which was a little more tragic, was a little girl fell off and died. Unfortunately, the only thing known is that it opened in 1885. Because again, there was the announcement that it opened that year. Then there was the guy complaining about the noise, and then the little girl falling out was all within 85, 86. And then there were no more mentions of it. So I have a feeling it probably went away after the 1886 season, but unfortunately, there is unfortunately, no confirmed pictures or anything identifying exactly what the coaster was. Yes, the oldest wooden coaster in Ohio is Sea Dragon at the Columbus Zoo. That was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, that was sometime towards the mid 1950s. It's like, I know it's on one of the even number years. I can't remember that year off the top of my head. But the Little Dipper at Memphis Kiddie Park is our oldest roller coaster in the state of Ohio, and that was built in 1952. 1956. Thank you, Colin. Yes, 1956 is when the Sea Dragon at Columbus Zoo opened. But Little Dipper at Memphis Kiddie Park opened in 1952 and is our oldest roller coaster. And crazily enough, the oldest continuously operating in one spot steel coaster, at least in the US. There's an argument for the world, but I'm just gonna leave that one alone. Um, so now after the switchback, Thompson ended up actually building bigger coasters. Again, we saw the switchback railway at Euclid Beach, but the switchback or the uh, scenic railways were built a lot different. They were built more for the theming, and there's not many of them still running. There's a couple in Europe, and there's one in Melbourne, Australia, is where all the switchbacks still, or all of the scenic railways still exist. But the thing that made these unique is they actually had a brakeman that would sit on the train with the guests riding and would manually operate a brake. So it functioned very, actually, more similarly to the actual switchback railway than the switchback railway the ride. But there's the one in Melbourne. So again, you can see in the middle of the two cars, you can see the brakeman standing there, waving to the camera. And this one is one of the less extravagant of the ones. One of the more popular ones, as you could see back here. This was the one at Coney Island. Cedar Point had one, and probably one of the most renowned ones was the Alps out at Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. Now, I think this postcard was a little embellished because it was a very impressive ride, but there still seems to be a lot more theming going on here than there are real pictures of it existing. Again, still a beautiful ride, but definitely embellished a little bit for the photo. Now you can actually see an aerial of that coaster down here on the right. So, I mean, it was a really big coaster, especially for the time. Unfortunately, Willow Grove is another park that is now closed. I if I'm not mistaken, that's actually the car they have on display at Philadelphia Toboggan Company, or the side friction car they have on display is one of these higher up coasters in that picture. Now, the Scenic Park Rocky River, here are a few pictures of it. It was a really interesting park as it sat in Rocky River. The main park did, and they did not allow alcohol whatsoever in the park. Like the city would not allow alcohol in the park. So what the park ended up doing is they built a bridge across the river over to the Lakewood side of the river, and they had a bar on that side of the river. So you cross the bridge, you could get your alcohol, and then people walk back over the park with it, which, as you can imagine, caused a lot of problems and eventually was kind of the catalyst for the downside of the park, which ended up making it close. Now, another big turning point of the industry was the Drop the Dips coaster, which was the first coaster to have a moving lap bar. Now the unfortunate part is it may have had a big part of the industry, and again, setting the standard of having a moving lap bar, but it operated 1 month and then burned down in one of those many Coney Island fires. So again, amusement parks back in the day, like early 1900s, and just the time of electricity being invented, they became a showcase for a lot of companies to show off their lights, show off electricity. So a very common icon of a lot of parks back in the day actually were just 100-foot tall light towers. It was just a tower that had thousands of light bulbs on it. And that being said, there's still didn't, and there were zero regulations for electricity. So they'd plaster their lights on everything, and then they'd short out and start a fire. And there's other reasons that things would catch on fire, but that was one of the big ones. Is that it? Oh, I guess that is it for that one. Oh, my last two slides went away. All right, so I suppose, does anybody have any further questions on this section of it, of the presentation? Any questions?
Not seeing any more.
Okay. So, oh, can't click on my next slide. Hold on, students. This is the next one. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. We have two options here. We have Sandy Beach or Northern Ohio parks. I believe this one we've touched a lot on. Okay, we will do Sandy Beach. So Sandy Beach, 1 second to load, was dubbed as Ohio's $1 million playground. Now, this park was down in Russell's Point, Ohio. This park had an interesting history. It operated from 1924 to 1975 and closed due to protests, unfortunately. It ruined how everyone saw the park and unfortunately kind of ended the park. But in its history, they had two different roller coasters, which, oh, The Sandy Beach side operated two coasters. At one point, they had a bigger coaster, a big wooden coaster that went out along the side and then down over the water. I can't remember if I have a picture of it. Is when you're looking at the parks from the shore, it was on the right side of the bridge. Um, one of them was the San Juan side, which was the west side. They had the Stardust Ballroom, Wild Mouse Coaster, and Mildred's Electric Malt Shop. That side was more of the adult side of it, is how it was deemed. I should say adult to teen side, because everyone knows how that goes. Um, and the east side was the Sandy Beach. That's where the Silver Streak was. That's where they had their outdoor stage. And then and that's where the infamous fire of 1935 there happened, which took out their dance hall and the coaster, and that's when they ended up building the dance hall that got them to the end. In 1962, uh, George B. Quatman ended up buying the second side of the park, and then removed the alcohol. It got rid of the two sides and combined them. And then he rebranded it as eventually as Indian Lake Playland. Now, the park at the time was pretty decent sized now, because again, it was combined the two halves, connected them with that bridge. The bridge was always there, but now they operate together, had a lot more rides there. And once all the protests started happening, and then the opening of Kings Island, that was kind of the end of the park. Here is a good overview of the two sides. Again, the right side is the original Sandy Beach. You can see their big wooden coaster there. And again, that was originally where all the rides were. But on the left side was where, again, it was more of the nightlife style stuff. Alcohol was permitted on that side. But once the two sides combined, rides kind of got spread out to try and spread the park out a little bit and fill in the gaps. Now, when I was making this presentation originally, it was at a very, very unfortunate time, because what was left at the time, and here's an overview of where the park used to be, was the bridge, which you can still walk over to this day, and the tower. Now, the Our Lady Tower, unfortunately, was destroyed by a tornado while I was making this presentation last year. So they are planning on rebuilding it, but what is really cool is actually, I believe it's the son of the guy that originally built the statue, which was George B. Quatman. If I remember correctly, it's his son that's pushing to get it rebuilt and gathering all the funding together to do so. And the second one, of course, is the bridge. They just fully restored that fairly recently. You can walk over it again. And it's actually has a floor again, because for a while the floor was gone and you couldn't actually walk over it. Now, we do actually have two ride cars from there. We have an Eli Ferris wheel car and a cuddle-up car. Now, the Eli Ferris wheels are very common. They were essentially the first company that mass-produced Ferris wheels, but we'll touch on that here in a second. And here's actually a picture of one that I got at one of our local fairs. So, I mean, their Ferris wheels are still frequently running. They're all over the place. The company actually boasts they still have 1,400 Ferris wheels in operation. Now, that's taking the company's word for it. Unfortunately, there's no public database of every single one still out there, but according to Eli Bridge Company, they have 1,400 wheels in operation. And they are still building Ferris wheels. They also build the scrambler rides that you see everywhere. And a little interesting tidbit is Neverland Ranch still operates with Archway Amusements, so it's on a traveling carnival circuit. And if you see it in person, they actually have a plaque that says it was from Netherland. I believe they have one other ride from there, or at least used to, and I think it was their swing ride. But don't quote me on the second one. Now, the Cuddle Ups. Those were largely distributed by Philadelphia Toboggan Company. They were originally designed by Burke Engineering, but they kind of faded out of wanting to market and sell themselves. So they, like a few different companies at the time, they ended up selling the rights to Philadelphia Toboggan Company. Another one that was absorbed into Philadelphia Toboggan at one point was actually Skee-Ball. At one point, PTC were the ones that sold skee ball machines. But the Cuddle Ups were one of the very first versions of a teacup ride. And they were very loud, wore out quickly. So unfortunately, we don't have really any of the. There are no original ones left. There's the second generation of them left. Now here are the three designs they came in. These are these are the five layouts they'd come in standard off the shelf. And the way they worked is all the plates would travel in opposite directions, and plates would actually pass off the ride cars. So each one again would be in separate directions. And I do have a video, because I know this is kind of hard to show here, but it was very fascinating. You'd have it essentially, if the car started here, it would follow, and then it could do a figure eight pattern. Now, it's actually kind of cool is the Crazy Daisy ride, which was essentially derived off of the original Huddle Up ride. There are still a few of those in existence, and again, gonna mention Knoebels again. They still have one of the original Crazy Daisies, and I can attest it's very loud. Supposedly, the old ones were even louder, so at least there's that. Now, so you can actually see how it operates. I do have a video. I hope it comes through all right. This is the modern version of it that Zamperla is trying to build. But as you can watch the cars in the center of the screen as they pass off between the two wheels, so they can go in a figure eight. Now, there are not many of these modern versions in existence. The two most popular ones are at Disneyland in California and Disney World down in Florida. And the one in California, that one's actually themed to Cars Mater. And it's those ones are kind of almost like a combination of the whip mixed with those, with the Cuddle Up rides. Now, here's a good picture of what our car would have looked like on the ride. So again, the older ones were a little more boxy looking, but personally I think it looks really cool. I like that more than let's go back, than the more Art Deco sheen looking ones. Then another fun fact, because Philadelphia Toboggan Company has built a lot of things over the years, and one of their original things they were known for, not just the cuddle ups, not just their coasters, but also their carousels. And our oldest ride in in Ohio right now is the Euclid Beach Carousel, which is still running up there at the Western Reserve very well. Again, another, if you like amusement park history, highly recommend stopping while you're in the area. It's very well kept. They just got their band organ back after restoration. And overall, beautiful machine. Now here's just some fun facts about the carousel. It operated at Euclid Beach from 1910 to 1969. Then was eventually sold to Palace Playland, where it operated until 1996, and then sold in auction, and then was eventually bought entirely out at that auction by the Western Reserve. Now, they auctioned each piece off individually, like each horse was auctioned individually, but at the end of the auction, they had the chance that if somebody wanted to buy the full machine for the sum of all the horses of what they sold for it, they could. And thankfully, the Western Reserve did. Now, one other of Euclid Beach's rides, because we have two Euclid Beach rides that are still running here in Ohio, which is Cedar Downs Racing Derby at Cedar Point, which originally opened in 1921. And then was moved to Cedar Point much, much later. Over the years, Ohio has seen quite a few of those PTC carousels. And here are the three. Are these just running? Yes, just running. Are the White City Cleveland one from Pier to Springs. That one operated there 1907, 1975. Something seems off with this. Because Euclid Beach is still running. Luna Park Cleveland's has been moved to Six Flags St. Louis. Then Coney Island's ended up at Kings Island when they made the move. White Cities, for the life of me, I can't remember if it got moved or not. At least that's. I have to do a little. I have to revise that slide. I'm a little rusty on that. Apologize, guys. Now something kind of cool is one was the first PTC ride in Ohio installed, and that was, as far as I can tell, the two figure-8 roller toboggans that were at Euclid Beach and Olentangy Park, respectfully, which there is still one roller coaster like this still in existence. Unfortunately, it hasn't operated in a couple of years, but that is Leap the Dips at Lakemont Park. Uh, all the rest of them, at least in the US, have been completely destroyed. There's rumors there may still be one lingering out in, uh, I believe it's Australia, but I have a strong feeling that that one was scrapped because it hasn't been seen in a couple decades now. Um, Here's a picture of some of the Philadelphia toboggan coasters still running in the state to this day. Again, you have Sea Dragon in the bottom right, which is our oldest wooden coaster in the state. You have Tornado just above that, which operates down at Stricker's Grove. They actually have two in-house built roller coasters, the Tornado and the um, Teddy Bear, which were based off of different pre-existing designs. And then there's a few more than just those. Of course, you have Blue Streak at Cedar Point, and then the Beast down here in the bottom left from Kings Island. And Kings Island actually has three coasters that run PTC trains. You also have the Racer and Woodstock Express. But that brings me to the end of this presentation. Again, I will open the floor up for questions.
Thank you,
Um,
Troy.
you're very welcome. Oh,
And if anyone has any questions, type them. I see a few now. We'll just take a short commercial break here for some upcoming events. First, we have our Heritage Ohio annual conference coming up in Canton next month, October 14th through 16th. It's a historic preservation and community revitalization conference. You can find more about that at heritageohioconference.com. Hotels are filling up very quickly, so if you need to get a room for that, book your room shortly. Also, next week we have a presentation, another webinar with historian and architectural survey master Barb Powers. She's worked at the SHPO since 1983 and just retired a few months ago. So she's going to be taking us through her favorite projects of the Ohio's National Register of Historic Places listings and also building surveys that were completed in Ohio. So if you're interested in that, you can find more information either on Facebook, LinkedIn, or our website, heritageohio.org. So our first question here, Troy, is do you know where we can still source individual vintage carousel horses?
yes. Honestly, Facebook Marketplace is one place you can always start. Um, Always make sure it's a genuine horse because there are a ton of reproductions out there. There's either that or there are a couple websites. I can't remember their names off the top of my head. Um, if you just go to Google and search carousel horses for sale, you should be able to find them. But there are some places that can verify the horse's age, all that kind of stuff. Um,
So one question I had was typically when you and your father and anyone else are working on one of the trains, how long does it take start to finish?
very depending on the condition of it. So some of the things have taken as short as a couple days. Those are the dream projects. Don't need to be touched much. But like the original Wolf Bob cars, the original pair, that took a year and a half, excuse me, a year and a half to do the pair. And then this one that we have now that we know how they go together and come apart, we should be able to pump this out in probably about 4 5 months.
Typically when you're working on them, like what percentage, are you having to replace parts, get reproduction stuff done with them versus originality on those?
Again, we try to keep it as close to all originals humanly possible. As close as humanly possible. The answer is the Wolf Bob cars that the first ones were restored. I hate to say it, are only like 50% original, and we had to replace all the wood on that. Uh, a lot of like the hardware, like the nuts and bolts on it, had to be replaced because then they just rusted together, and the only way to take them apart was to cut them. So a lot of hardware will frequently get replaced. Wood will typically get replaced. Steel, ideally, don't have to replace. So far, I think we've only had to replace a couple steel parts. I can't remember what the parts are off the top of my head. It's nothing substantial, like when
Sure.
it comes to replacing the specialty parts. The Lenape car, a good majority of that one's actually original. We had to replace the running boards; those were rotten out. We had to replace the little front piece because that was gone. It didn't exist. And then the cushions on the inside. Pretty much, oh yeah, that's one thing that pretty much always gets replaced are the cushions in the ride cars, because mice love to live in ride cars. It's like,
Definitely can see that happening.
yeah, pretty much, pretty much the very first thing we have to do is get rid of mice, get rid of ants. That's always the first step. It's like our car we got for the Big Dipper. It had a huge ant nest in it. We covered it in a tarp, put a I can't remember if he actually put a bug bomb in there or just sprayed the snot out of it with Ant Be Gone or whatever it's called. But that's the bugs are always a big struggle.
Elaine has a question here. Can you repeat exactly what caused all the electrical fires, such as the one in Coney Island?
So pretty much there are no regulations on electricity, so they just throw them up all willy-nilly. If you actually look at old wiring, there's a lot of things that were not insulated at all. It was just bare wires would be run and just spaced apart. So all it would take is say a mouse gets in there, messes with something, those wires touch, you get a spark, you get a fire. And because a lot of, well, not a lot, pretty much everything back then was wood. So, I mean, it was just a giant Kindle box ready to go up the second it caught on fire. Or the second, I should say, not caught on fire, the second a spark occurred, it was ready just to go up in flames. And there's also a lot of instances in the industry that it was arson. A lot of it is, there's still quite a few arson cases. But a lot of the oldest ones were there was an electrical fire that would frequently cause parks to burn down.
So you kind of alluded to this earlier, but what are some ways that roller coaster and amusement park enthusiasts can help support the Ohio Amusement Museum?
So honestly, just share posts if you ever have time to come out and volunteer for a few hours. We're always looking for help. Um, it's a massive undertaking. Like ride car restorations, I mean, are hundreds of hours. So it's like, even if it's taking 5 hours off of our 100-hour load, that's a massive help. And another thing is if you're interested in amusement park like souvenirs, I do have an online store, Midway Marketplace. It's called on Etsy. Uh, Monetarily, that's about the only thing I sell. So again, I always ask for people's time if possible, because that's what I think what we need the most right now. It's just help with everything.
Sounds good. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions, Troy, so I just want to thank you once again for this great presentation on the history of amusement parks in Ohio. And, I think, we'll send out information to everyone. We'll include your Facebook page so everyone has that access. So if anyone's interested in volunteering some time, they can sign up. But thanks once again, Troy. Do you have any final comments before we go?
Well, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me out. This is a lot of fun. So I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you everyone for joining us. And you said this is going to be posted, recorded somewhere too. So
Let me see here. Missed one comment. I just want to repeat Richard's comment that September 11th at the Huron Public Library in Huron, Ohio, Ohio's Lost Amusement Parks. Brian George of North Coast Narrative will discuss Ohio amusement parks, their roots and history. They'll touch on Euclid Beach Park, Crystal Beach, Edora, and more. So if you guys are interested in some more history, you can head up tomorrow to Huron at the Public Library for that presentation. So without, let's see. Okay, no more questions. I got my window freeze for a second there. So yeah, thanks once again, Troy. We'll send out the recording of this tomorrow. You can also find it on our YouTube channel, which is you can just search Heritage Ohio. And we'd like to thank both the Ohio Department of Development and the Ohio Arts Council for funding webinars like these. So thank you everyone for attending today. We'll see you at our next webinar. Thanks.